Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we'll masech this Avodah Zarah daf Nun Gimel. We are going to begin on Nun Beis Mud Beis by the Mishnah. Says the Masnisim. Oibid kochavim mevatel oivedes koichavim shelo v'shel chavero. So a non-Jewish idol worshiper has the capacity to be mevatel the idols, not only his, but interestingly enough, also the idols that belong to his friend. And that's only by an akum. However, Yisrael in mevatel oivedes kochavim shelo kochavim. Yisrael has no ability to be able to mevatel an idol which belongs to an ovid kochavim. That he cannot do. Hamavatel ovedes kochavim mevatel misham sheha. And a second din, if a person is mevatel the idol, it's also mevatel all of its kalim as well, all of its accessories, if you will. However, bittul misham sheha mishamshin mutarin v'yasura. However, if all they did was mevatel the accessories, like the kalim, but not the Avodah Zarah, then obviously the Avodah Zarah does not go along with it, because the ikr is the Avodah Zarah. So if you're mevatel the Avodah Zarah, then everything else is batel. Says the Gemara, Masi Rev Rabbi Reb Shimon B'Rabbi. So this is a pretty big chiddush. That of course we know an Ovid Kachavim can be mevatel his own idols, but he can even mevatel something which does not even belong to him. So that again is pretty amazing. Amalei Rabbi Shani Salanu Bilad Techa. It was taught in your youth. It actually says not Bishel Chavero, but it means he can be mevatel not only his idols, but also that which belongs to Yisrael. Gemara asks, how's that possible? The Yisrael mika mevatel? How could he be mevatel it? Vaha some besaser ksiv. It says, as we saw in yesterday's daf, that it has to become concealed, and it's still considered to be aser. So we see that the idol of the akum the idol worshiper who is an akum should not have the capacity to mevatel the avodah zarah of Israel. So Amrav Hil Berei de Rabbi Villas when nisrachal sheish loiba shutvus. You're right. Normally, an akum should not be mevatel the avodah zarah of Yisrael, but in the event that you have a partnership between the Jew and the non-Jew in the avodah zarah, so by the fact that he's able to be mevatel his avodah zarah portion, it will also kick into that of the Yisrael. So that's the chiddush. Bialduso Mike Savar, Viziknusu Mike Savar. What does it mean? In my youth it was this, when I was older. So what exactly is this? What changed? So Bialduso Savar Yisrael Adaita Dev Kachavim Halach. I originally thought that in my youth that the Yid, he was worshiping the idol because of the idol worshiper. That is, the Jew only was worshiping the idol due to the goy. So therefore, if the akum is mevatel it, then it's batel for the Jew as well. However, kivan de ovid chachavim mevatel, so kivan de ovid chachavim mevatel and nashini so namim mevatel. And that's what I thought originally, that really, okay, there's a partnership, but the only reason why the Yid is really doing it, he doesn't really want to worship the idol, he's doing it because of his partner. So now that the partner, the Ovid Kachavim, says it's batel, so therefore it's batel for him too. However, v'ziknusu savar Yisrael daita de nashi palach. It's interesting, like maybe when you're younger, you're more naive to think that a Yid is every Yid is a tzaddik and he's worshiping an idol. He's not really meaning to worship an idol. The truth is, yeah, he had his own intention. And therefore, ki mevatel v'kachavim denashe the Yisrael batel. He can only be mevatel his portion, but not the portion of the Yid. Yisrael in mevatel v'kachavim shelo v'kachavim. Yisrael cannot be mevatel an idol that belongs to Ovid Kachavim. Shita. Obviously, he can't. So Amrav Hillel Berei the Rabbi, as we continue to do Gimel Amud Aleph, Rabbi Villas, Lo Nitzracha She'ela Sheyesh Ba Shutvus. So the chiddush is that even though there is a partnership a Jew and a non-Jew own this idol, v'kamashwan Yisrael hu lo mavatal the Chachavim, that Yisrael cannot be mavatal the portion of the Chachavim. Of Chachavim the nafshe mavatal, but he can be mavatal his own portion. He can masni lo brayso. Rav Shimon bar Nasi Aimer Avodas Chachavim Shel Yisrael ein lo betel lamas, that the Avodah Zarah of a Yid can't be mavatal it. My lamas. So Rav Hill beridu Rav Elishal El Sheishlo of Chachavim b'shutvas. In the case there's a partnership, Kamashman Yisrael adaita denashi palach. He was doing it for his own intentions, and therefore we can't say it's all totally in the das of the Ovi Chachavim. So even though the Ovi Chachavim is mavatal, he's only mavatal his portion, not the entire thing. Okay, let's see the next Mishnah. Says the Masnisen, Kates and mavatali. So we're talking about bittul. How is a person able to be mavatal an idol? So kata raish, azna raish chotma raish etzba. Let's say you cut off different parts of the image, its ear, its nose, its fingers. So you're basically destroying it. Or pachsa, let's say you crushed it with a hammer, but it's still alphabi shaloi chisra bitla. Even though nothing actually fell off, you just smashed it, but the same amount of metal is still there, but it's just more consolidated or condensed. Nonetheless, that is a bittul. However, rog b'faneha, hishn b'faneha, grara, zarkla, satsaya harzenu b'teila. If let's say you spit in front of it, which again you're doing it not because that's the avodah, but you're showing your lack of respect, or you urinated, or you drag it around, or you throw so on it, it's not bittul. Why not? So Rashi says, even though obviously you're showing a lack of respect to the avodah zarah, maybe you're just angry at it for the moment, and then maybe you're going to go and worship it afterwards. Okay, and all of this is talking about an Ovi Chachavim, trying to be mevatel it. And then the Mishnah concludes, Machra o Mashkana, let's say he either sells it or he gives it as collateral, so he borrows money, then he gives it to the lender as collateral, so then we have a machlokas Rabbi Yomi bittul Chachamim lo bittul. So says the Gemara, Kilo chisra b'may bittul. Understand, if you smashed it with a hammer, but it's still there, so why is that a bittul? So Rabbi Zarah she pachsa b'fanel, because you smashed it right in its face, and that's a kilkel in its surta, in its form, as Rashi says. So raka b'faneha v'hisha b'faneha minhan mil. So how do we know that maybe a person is going to worship afterwards, and his intention was just he was upset at the moment? So because we find this in the pasuk in Yeshaya, it says va'aber ba nikshe v'roiv b'haya ki yirav, and it was when he was in famine, v'his katsaf, and he got very upset. V'kilel b'malkoi, and he started cursing the king, Elohav, and as well as his gods, Ufan lamala, and then he turned to God. V'ksib basrei, but then not much later, the next pasuk actually says, Vel eretz yabit, that toward the earth he looked, V'hini tsara v'chashecha mu'uf, etc. So what do we see? The afagav the kilo malchay ve'elohav, even though originally he cursed his idols, ufan lamal, and he turned to Hashem, el eretz yabit. He eventually went back to the earth. In other words, as Rashi says, he ended up worshiping his idol. So he was looking up, and then he changed his mind, and then he looked down. So the fact that you show a lack of respect to an idol does not necessarily make it bittul forever. Machor mishkana Rabbi Omer bittul. So again, we have this machlokas. If you either sell or give your avodah zarah as a mashkain for a loan. So Ziri Omer Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Yirmi Rabbi Omer Rav Chada Omer machlokas. So it's a machlokas was bittul. But actually, within that, machlokas b'tzar v'chachavim. The question is, who did he sell it to? Well, let's say he sold it to a smith who is an idol worshiper. So there, it's questionable whether or not it's batal. Says Rashi, Hasam kamera bundle batal. Why is it not batal? The savar hamoicher kivan do lekech zavich hu palachla v'loy taverla. So maybe because I'm selling it to an oivik kachavim, so he's also a fellow idol worshiper. He's not going to smash it and use it for the metal, but he's going to worship it because he's an idol worshiper. So maybe that's why maybe one opinion would say it's not batal. But Zarah Yisrael, if you sold it to a yid, so as Rashi says, mastama batla medaitim yada dahaim taverla. He's going to break the idol. So divrei kol bittel. So maybe if you sell it to a Jew, you can assume he's going to be less likely to have used it as Avodah Zarah. So why are you selling it to a Yid? Because you're mavatal it. The Chader no. But Sarif Yisrael machlokas. The whole machlokas is by Sarif Yisrael that whether or not it's batal. Now you boy who? But Sarif Yisrael machlokas over Sarif Chavan Divrei Kol bittel. Does that mean that everyone agrees when it comes to selling to an akum it's not batal because you assume that the idol worshiper is going to use it? Dilma. This logic is brought down in many places in Shas, like in the beginning of Sukkah, etc. So Tashma Diyamurav Nirin Divarav, it appears by my words, Divarai, Kishamachra Lechavala, if it was sold to be destroyed, Vidivri Chaverai, and like the opinion of my friend, Shemachra Oivda, that it was sold to be used. Okay, we're going to explain that a little bit better. So maybe if it was used to be destroyed, then obviously it was batal. However, it was used to be worshipped, then it's not batal. So ma'il chaval ma'il avda, ilim chaval chaval ma'amish avda ma'amish. So my tam damana bittul, my tam damana bittul. How could you argue with each other? Shouldn't be any machlokas. Obviously, if you know the guy's going to worship it, so you're not mevatel it, and if you know the guy's going to destroy it, that is bittul. Elav l'chavla l'misha asel l'chavla means someone who potentially could destroy it. L'man hu tzarif Yisrael, a yid. So when it comes to a yid, he's more likely to destroy it, and therefore it's bittul. L'oivda l'misha asel l'oivda l'man hu tzarif l'chavim. That even though he is a smith, he's more likely he's going to worship it. This is how you read it. I can understand it was sold to be destroyed. Then it makes sense that it should be bittul. Man who serve Yisrael. Actually, we know by Yisrael that he would destroy it. We know that the only time my friend will argue with me is only when it was sold to be served. He should at least agree to me there. So it's possible that they don't argue when it comes to the case of a Sarif Yisrael. Maybe in that case, again, it's possible to be call it will be batal. Okay. Meisvei, so again, it's not so clear what the din is. So Meisvei, so I have a kasha. It says like this: let's say a person purchases silver chips or pieces from an akum, and mastama, maybe you just bought it just for the metallic use, and you found somehow among this metal, this silver, you found idols. So it depends. If before you gave the money was transferred, you did mashicha, then yakser, then you could return it. In other words, the sale wasn't binding, and therefore the sale didn't happen yet. And therefore, because of that, you can always just return it to him. It's not a problem. And even though it was mashicha, you can say mashich b'tois. Okay. However, however, once the transaction has been complete, then you have to destroy it. Now, and Rashi says, you can't say, well, maybe I should just give back this idol. He'll give me back my money. Because it was a mistake, since monies were exchanged, and now let's say you give it back to him, it looks almost like the other way around. It looks like he's now buying it from you. And people are going to think that you're selling him idols. What do we see? Even though he sold something to Israel, Katani Asura Dulu Batul. It's obviously not batul, right? So we see that when you sell something to Israel, it's not batul. So that when you sell it to a yid, it's batul. So hamani, this doesn't make sense, because if it's completely batul, then why wouldn't he be able to just give it back to him or sell it back to him? Why would he have to throw it into Yam HaMelech? Must be because he's not mavatul it, even though he gave it to Israel. The answer is you're right. Normally, actually, when he would sell to Israel, maybe it is batul. But Shani Hasam, in this case, is different. The daita de gerutois zaven, a daita de Avodah Chachamim lo zaven, because when the Avodah Chachamim sold it, his thought process was only on the metal. He wasn't thinking about the Avodah Zarah. If he was thinking about the only selling the Avodah Zarah, then he would be mavatul it by giving it to Israel, because then it was going to destroy it. However, over here, he was really just selling him a whole bunch of metal, and in it was Avodah Zarah. So therefore, his das wasn't on it, and therefore he couldn't. Maybe he wasn't mavatul. It says Rashi, he wasn't intending to sell it. He didn't even realize there was idols in there. So maybe it's not batul in this case. Let's say he actually sold only an idol to a smith who is a yid. Okay, let's look at question 11. So we said, before you give the money, even if you did Mashicha, that doesn't matter. But since you didn't give up the money, you can give it back. And the akum yivatlena. If the akum is mavatal it, then you can take it back. However, mishnas and mais, once money was exchanged, then unfortunately it must be discarded. Okay. All right. Let's just see if there's another question here. Let's look at TB. Okay. Let's continue. Tanurban. So let's say a person, Rashi says, let's say there's a loan over here regarding an Avodah Chachamim to even a smith who is Israel, or for that matter, let's say a building collapsed on an idol. You had some bandits that stole it, and Rashi is ve'enu maksar achareha, because they're armed bandits. You're not going to chase after it. You basically, there's nothing you can do about it. Let's say the owner of the idol went to another country, and who knows if they're coming back, when they're coming back. So maybe all these things are bittul as we continue to give them a base. So it says like this, it depends. Then Bilmuchamas Yoshua Eina Batela. If their intention is to come back, Kimachloikis Yeshua, just like the Milchamas Yeshua, just like the battle of Yeshua, then that's not batul. So look at Rashi. The Gemara is going to ask, what do you mean? If their intention is to come back, like in the war of Yoshua, when Yoshua was fighting against those enemies, they didn't return. So what exactly does this mean? Okay, we'll have to explain that. Gemara is going to ask that. Anyway, question, why do we need all these cases? If we're talking about a case where he used it with regard to a loan, in other words, it was as collateral. He gave the Avodah Zarah as a collateral on a loan. The fact that he didn't sell it, maybe that's why it's not batul. If a building fell on it, maybe the fact that he didn't clear away the stones to try to get it back, so why didn't he try to get it? It must be he was mavatul it. No, maybe not. That it may not be batul mishum the summer manchas. I say, well, it's there. Okay, I just don't have time to remove the building, these stones, but eventually I will, and I know the Avodah Zarah is there, and I'm mavatul it. Kol amos the be'ina la sheklina. Whenever I want, I'll come and get it. Aval ganvu listim. When bandits come and take it, midaloy kamahader basar. Why did I go and chase after them? Must be batuli bottle. Maybe I could have gotten it back. So sricha v'itana ganvu listim. When they stole it, mishum de savar. I think iyo kachavim shakol milfach polachla. You know what? If they're idol worshippers, then it was a avikachavim thief. Then fine, they'll worship it. The Yisrael shakla, it was the Yisrael that stole it. So I did the meha yikarin because it's so valuable. Mazvin avikachavim. They're probably going to sell it to an avikachavim. Upalacha. They're not going to sell it to a thief who's a yid. Isn't going to sell it to another Yisrael because the Yisrael's not going to buy it for a lot. They're going to destroy it, or they're not going to use it. They'll sell it to an avikachavim. So therefore, maybe my das is not to mavato on a stolen. However, the guy just deserts it and goes to another country. Why didn't he take it with him on the trip? Must be because he doesn't need it anymore. He doesn't care about it anymore. That's why I have all these different cases. Okay. So he said, if he leaves, it depends if his intention is to come back. What do you mean? They didn't come back. So, if his intention is to come back, then it's comparable to the battle of Yeshua, because they thought they were coming back. So it wasn't batal, and it was all usr. The Einla Batela. So it doesn't mean that necessarily that they came back. The point is that what their intention was. Says Rashi, they went out. The demon, their intention was laxo. So understand, why do you have to compare it to the battle of Yeshua? Why are you bringing that up? Just say whether or not his intention is to come back. Why do you have to add this? So Milsa Gabor can come Ashwan. It's telling us an additional fact. So let's say you have Yisrael that sets up a brick to bow down to it, but he didn't actually bow down to it. We had this before, but Avikachavim actually does bow to it, Asra. So Manon the Asra. How do we know that it's Asra? So Rabbi Lezer, Kitchila shel Eretz Yisrael. It says that the idols and the trees of Avodah Zarah need to be destroyed. Understand, this whole thing is a Yerusha. Eretz Yisrael is a Yerusha. So why is this Aser? It's not theirs to have Asered it. So why do we have to destroy it? And you can, even if you want to say that it has some capacity, then just basically being mavatal, it should be enough. Why does that have to be destroyed? The fact that the Yidden bowed down to the Egel Hazahav, Gola the Taihu the Nichelhu b'Vaskachavim. It shows that we do have a desire to worship idols. And therefore, it's ki'ilu like these people, the Chachamim, that have these idols there, they're actually almost like doing our bidding, our agency. And therefore, that's why it has to be destroyed. It's not that it's not theirs. It's almost ki'ilu like they made the Avodah Zarah for us to eventually be able to use it. Hachinam Yisrael shezakav lavenu. Once the Jew sets up a brick, even though he didn't worship it, gali daita denichle v'chachavim. Obviously, it shows that he wants it for idols. And therefore, when the Akum comes and bows, shlichusa didei ka'avid. So one second. V'dilma be'egelhu denichelahu b'midyachrina loy. Why do we make this assumption? Just because we worship the Egel Hazav, that means we're going to want to worship all other idols. So Amarka, because the pasuk says in Shemos, v'yikach miyadam v'yasar oso b'cheret v'eso Egel masecha, that they made this idol. V'yomer, and they said, Elel hechi Yisrael, this is the God asher helucha me'eretz Mitzrayim, that took us up. So Malamid, we went out from there, shi'avu eluhus harbe, that they actually had many idols. So Ema Kol Habahadi Egel Nisteru Mekan Be'elch Nisteru. Why don't we just say that it was only at that time that they had a propensity to worship idols, and therefore all those idols are aser, but not now. So man muchach. How could you prove the age of the tree? So it's mashma that if you would know the trees from after, it would be mutter after you come into Eretz Yisrael. But when you enter in Eretz Yisrael, we don't know, and that's what Rashi says over here. Mio de eza ezu hoisa bo'isa shav ezu nevda achri kain. Okay, we're going to stop there. Let's look at question 12. Madua nesru ashiroi shenmisu b'nei Yisrael. Why are these trees aser when we enter Eretz Yisrael? It's a Yerusha and it can't be aser davar shen shalo. So the answer is Kishavdi Yisrael Egel Gila Daitim Shenichu Avodas Chachavim. It showed that we liked idols, but Akam also Shlichusam V'Neser Alamas, and therefore these trees became aser. TA 5. Asher Shenat Hakom Eretz Kadim Shenat Eretz Yisrael Elo Asuros Ve'Elo Eno Asuros. This is an important point. So the trees that were there in the time of the Egel Hazav are aser because they were doing our shlichus, and therefore it's kavod Zarah Shel Yisrael. However, anything that was planted afterwards, which we know about, therefore was not part of it, are mutter. De'ein adam oiser davar sheinu shaloi. Question TB 7. Yisa b'brayis achiluk bein moicher akam l'oivda de'einu b'teil moicher l'chavala. The bottle. Okay, so we saw this. This is on the previous daf. It's because it can't just mean pashit that if your intention was to have it to sell it to Yisrael, to an Akum who you knew was going to worship it, so then obviously it's a davar pashit that it should be. It should be it's near not mavatalit. And if it's to a yid that you know for a fact is going to destroy it, then of course it should be batal. So that was the Gemara over here on Nun Gimel Mud Aleph. That's why it says here that Ilay Chavala Mamish. So if it means Mamish destroying and Mamish worshipping it, then there can't be a machlokas. Rather, what it means is a Chavala Lamish Asid L'Chavla. It means a Yisrael. Well, Oivda is Lamish Asid L'Chavamahu Sarif Chachavim. And therefore we learn out from here that maybe there's a machlokas between the two regarding both opinions. This is TB 7. Let's see what I wrote over here. Imachal Akum Lo Bittel Mibnei Shahalakech Savar Shehu Gam Oived Avodah Zarah. I think that's a great answer. Adkan.